Okay, in this short video, I want to discuss reasons why I assigned the assignment about Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer, and trying to find out when he was born by looking at online sources. And I had a couple reasons for this. Reason number one is that I wanted you to experience the notion of common knowledge. Now, you know, we generally understand that if a data or a fact, if it's an historical fact or it's a very well-known fact, that you don't necessarily have to cite a source for the fact, like, that Abraham Lincoln is the 16th president of the United States. Well, just put that down there. That's so easy to ascertain or to check, and so easy that we can find it in so many places and it's nobody's original idea. So, general historical facts and things like that are very, that's common knowledge. But it gets a little trickier to really grapple with this and understand it in full when you have different sorts of information that you find. Say, some information about someone like Geoffrey Chaucer that you find at 3 or 4 or 5 different websites, and they all seem to be saying the same thing, and they themselves are not citing specific sources. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't cite them or that you have the license to not reference them as far as like this is where you got the data from. But you do get the sense that people are treating this as just general information that doesn't really belong to anybody in particular, and it's not coming from any one site, so why bother citing it? Now, the one thing is, regardless of what type of information you have, if you are quoting word for word, you need to use quotation marks carefully. You need to make sure that your word for word accuracy is right on, and you also need to then reference the source, even if it's the most mundane of facts. If you're quoting word for word and you're actually copying somebody's sentencing pattern or word order in a sentence, you need to cite that as a quotation. All right, with the page number or paragraph number and the last name of the author and all that sort of thing, okay? Now, I'm not talking about the quotation marks that you sometimes put around like this when you want to reference some words as being sarcastic or as being ironic. These are called scare quotes, and it sounds like scarecrow, I know, but scare quotes. Colloquially, they're also known as, air quotes, but it's scare quotes. And, you're not really quoting from anybody there, right? You're trying to draw attention to the fact that you're approaching some words ironically, all right? But when you are, word for word, copying word for word from a source because you just want to use that same sentence or whatnot, you do need to cite it, regardless of what you're quoting or how well known that fact may be. But let's say you want to paraphrase it or put that same idea in your own words or couch that data, the facts, 1917, whatever, the numbers in your own words. You're getting the numbers from that site. Do you need to quote that site? Well, a fairly safe rule of thumb is, if you can find those same numbers from various sites and no one is saying that they're coming from a particular origin, so not one of those sites is saying we got these numbers from this. They're sort of treating that already as common knowledge. You probably can get away with it. Now, if the data is overly specific and overly technical, and you are really finding only 1 or 2 sites that can give it to you, you're always on the safe side to actually quote it or paraphrase it and cite it, if only for a courtesy to the reader, to let the reader know where you got that information. But also, it'll keep you on the safe side as far as proprietary management. Are you stealing somebody's ideas, that sort of thing? So, or somebody's data that was gotten from a certain experiment. By the way, let's have a little aside here. If you are pulling numbers from an experiment, and the experiment had originators, in other words, experimenters that came up with the experiment, and sort of like the authors of the article that, they did the experiment, they wrote it up, that really is their data. And even though it's hard facts and hard Scrabble facts and stats and things like that, you need to cite that, okay? Because it's coming from an original experiment that a group of experimenters or authors contrived and came up with. So they are the authors of that. They're the proprietors of that information, and you need to give them credit by. But something like Chaucer, okay? Like, when was he born? I had you go to 4 sites and to look at the data, and you realize that a lot of them are saying, well, we don't know for sure. It's from 1400 to 1440 to 1445. He could have been born anywhere around there, right? I'm sorry. 1340 to 1345. He could have been born anywhere around there, right? That's what they're saying. And you see that sort of notion repeated 3 times out of the 4. You should really go with that, and you could treat that as common knowledge. So you didn't have to like cite where exactly you got that information from. But let's say that there was one source that said, aha, we have found ways to prove that he was born in 1343. On October 1343, we've actually discovered the missing church records or whatever. Because that is so original and so new that if you were to use that data, you definitely need to cite that source, because that is a new interjection or a new set of information and evidence and proof that's being brought to the table. But as it stands right now, a lot of people are just in basic agreement that given everything we have as far as evidence goes, we can't put the date anywhere with specificity beyond 1340 to 1345. So that sort of general notion, because it's generally accepted, and you can see this by finding it in various websites, could be common knowledge. Again, the site that comes and says, hold everything, we have new data, we can now determine that it was 1343, they're sort of scooping the issue, see? And they deserve the credit for that, so at that point you would need to cite them. Okay. Now let's talk about something a little different here. What about something like when the Titanic went down? Okay, do you know the year the Titanic sank? It was 1912 that it went down. So you would not. Can you find this readily online or in reference manuals? Do you see it challenged anywhere? No. And you can find it readily. It's not challenged. It's accepted. Treat that as common knowledge. All right. But how many of you watching this video know how many tons the Titanic weighed? How many of you know how many meters long it was from tip to tip, lengthwise? So if you were to get that specific with the data, could you find that data on various sources? You know, maybe you can. But because it's so specific, it would be a courtesy to the reader for you to cite your source so that they know where you're getting it from. All right. So I guess 2 things to keep in mind, at least right now, for what I wanted to discuss in this video about common knowledge is if someone is challenging a common notion, you need to cite that challenger. You need to, if you're pulling from his or her information, you need to cite them. If in fact you are repeating the common notion and it is readily found and it's found from a number of places and it's not overly specific and it's just already out there in what's maybe known as the lore of the information, or the, well, you probably can get by, and you know it's not anybody's original idea. You can get by, as long as you're not going word for word, you can get by treating that as common knowledge and just by paraphrasing it or putting in your own words and not necessarily citing it. But if you get the sense that this is someone's original idea or original notion or a challenge to the status quo, you do need to cite that. So, you know, you respect somebody's rights over that information that way. But then the other thing is, think about just citing as a courtesy, because, you know, it can never hurt anybody to run across an extra citation. You can put it in a footnote, an endnote. It will always keep you safe. But it can also just be simply viewed as a courtesy to the reader, saying, hey, you know, I know this is common knowledge, but if you want to find out exactly where and see it for yourself or find more information on this, go to this site. So sometimes using a footnote for that, or just abbreviated parenthetical citation, could keep you above board with that.